Yesterday, we spoke, this is a speech given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1953. It's in a book called Likuti Sichot, which there is presently, I don't know, like 40 volumes or something. I don't know how many volumes there are. And that's just sort of the beginning of the years of the Rebbe, of speeches that he gave, very wonderful on all different subjects, Torah subject, and mostly on the portion of the week, the Torah portion of the week. So this week's Torah portion is double, and it talks about, like we learned yesterday, the number 8, right? The circumcision. That's how the first Torah portion that we read called Tazria starts off, and we explained the idea of number 8, etc. And now this is the second Torah portion that talks about Metzora, talks about leprosy, but also it talks about certain types of impurity, and namely, it says that if a woman has menstruation, a woman menstruates, so that she's impure. She's impure. Okay, she has the 7 days of impurity. So he says, why is she impure? It's just a natural, normal process. Well, why should she be impure? If a person cuts himself and blood comes out, he's not impure. It doesn't make him impure. Blood is not, make him impure. So why should this woman be impure? It's just a natural process. So he says, well, this is sort of like a payoff, a punishment, or the result of the sin of Eve, Chava. She ate from the tree. She brought selfishness, evil, death into the world. And she did it. She was the woman. So therefore, she's visited by death, namely this menstruation, once a year. Because what is menstruation? It's an egg that wasn't fertilized. So it had the potential of life, and it didn't have life. So therefore, it's a little bit of death, and therefore, she is impure. So good. So she's impure. Why should we be impure? What's it got to do with us? So the Rebbe says like this: every Jew, this is what we learned yesterday. Every Jew, we're called a holy nation. We're not just holy because of our soul. The Jewish nation also, their bodies are holy. Their bodies are vehicles for their soul. Now, everybody has a soul. Everyone has a soul. Every human being has a soul, but that's a human soul. A human soul. And Jewish people also have a human soul. A normal human soul, we have a conscience, we have desires, we have love, we have fear. Normal, we have a family. But Jews also have an additional thing, which is called a godly soul. And this godly soul feels God. Feels God, just like a normal soul feels yourself. This godly soul, it feels God. And a Jew's body is a vessel for this godly soul. So, therefore, a Jewish body cannot, contain impurity. Can't take it. So therefore, when the woman, the egg is not fertilized and life is not created, so that is the opposite of life, and that is pushed out, can't take it. And the result of that whole business is that for a while she contained impurity and inside of herself this egg, and it gets ejected from her body, and that whole business is a little touch of death, and that makes her impure. Because a Jewish body cannot bear impurity. The Jewish body is only supposed to be a vessel for the godly soul, for godliness, like a holy temple. At the holy temple, there were all these stringencies and all these laws. You couldn't go in if you touched a dead animal. You couldn't go in. All these tremendously strict laws there were. And the same thing, the Jewish body also has these strict laws that impurity cannot be held inside of it. Okay, answer, nice answer. Says the Rebbe, I want to tell you something else about this, the impurity of menstruation. Says the Rebbe like this. 1 second. Like I say, we talked about this a lot of times. The Torah is a teaching book. Every single detail, every word in the Torah comes to teach us something about serving God. Everything. Every detail in the Torah tells us about something about teaching God. So here we have a detail which doesn't seem to have really anything to do with us, at least the men at all, right? This is a thing for the women. And not only that, impurity, there's no such thing as impurity today. there's just laws. There's no impurity. There's no holy temple where you can't go somewhere or you can't do something because you're impure. A person that touches a dead body, he can go anywhere he wants. There is, as far as it says that a Kohen is forbidden to defile himself. So a Kohen is not allowed to touch a dead body, and he can't be in a room where there's a dead body. But except for that, it's not relevant. So what is this whole thing relevant to us? Says the Rebbe, listen. In the din, the law of nida, the impurity of this, when a woman sees menstrual blood, that she's forbidden to her husband is farana chakira. There is, that's the law. Then there is a chakira, a discussion. See, there is if this prohibition that she's prohibited to have marital relations with her husband, does that come from tumas nida, from the impurity? Because she's impure, she can't have relations with her husband. Other, what she is this is a Zion, a bezundra isur. It's just a separate prohibition. Huh? Like on Shabbat, you're not allowed to light fire. Why? That's it. You're just not allowed to light fire. So you can say, well, there's sort of a reason, and the reason is that you're not supposed to do work on Shabbat. So lighting fire is like sort of a work. So you can't. The same thing, a woman when she is in her menstrual time, so she can't have relations with her husband. Why? Because she's impure. She can't give. Not she's impure, but it's a law. It's a law. That's just a law. Like on Shabbat, you're not supposed to light fire. Also, it's not, but it has a little bit of sense to it. Namely, if she can't become pregnant, no way. And the main purpose of having, marital relations is to have children. And, secondary also, there's, love, affection, etc. involved. But the main thing is to have children. That's the reason it is. So sort of makes sense that she can't be with her husband. It's a law. Was hat nitzutan, which has nothing to do with her impurity. Und sie seinen da rayos, and there's proof. But okay, so we don't know. Is the reason her husband can't have anything to do relations with her is because she's impure? And even though that today there is no such impurity, but still the law of impurity carries down. Eventually there will be a temple. In any case, the law is made, and even if the reason for the law goes away, it's still there. The reason for the law that a man can not have relations with his wife after she sees menstrual blood is because she's impure, or because it's just a law. Like I said, it's like a law, like you're not supposed to light a match on Shabbat. It's a law because Shabbat you're supposed to rest. So, and there's proofs for both sides, right? Whether it is a prohibition in itself or because it's of impurity. A man and a woman, dolamata here in this world, mit alle seinen prati, with all the details, also the details of the laws. Let's make it a little bit bigger here. Also, these laws, the details of the laws, they are what we do in this world, especially a man and a woman that get married. This is sure, so to speak, their source is like everything physical in the world, everything in the world was yet from which each one of them derives some sort of a spiritual source. So the source of a man and a woman getting married and having relations, their source is the man is God and the woman is the Jewish people. Kodesh Baruch Hu Knesset Yisrael was Veran Angerufim. They're called man and woman. As we spoken so many times before, there's one of the books of the Torah is a book called the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, written by King Solomon. And the whole book is an allegory and a metaphor. It's not to be taken at simple value, face value. The only book in the Torah that's like that. There's no simple meaning. And it's all an allegory and a metaphor and whatever it is, a hint at this at God's love for the Jews' love for God, how God searches for the Jews, how the Jews search for God, how God hides himself from the Jews, how the Jews are running away from God, and how God runs after them, etc. And sometimes it's plural, and sometimes singular, and sometimes masculine, sometimes feminine, past and present and future. It's all, so to speak, holy poetry. It's the song of songs, poem of poems. So it talks about the relationship, the love relationship between God and the Jewish people and God. And it says that the day that God gave the Torah, that's the day of the wedding. And the consummation of the wedding will be when Moshiach comes. Okay, we'll talk about that. But then nevertheless, the relationship is of man and woman is man is God and the woman is the Jewish people, as exhibited by the great King Solomon, wisest man that ever lived, in his book, The Song of Songs. And this, of course, is also the theme in the book, the Zohar, and etc., the masculine aspect, the feminine aspect. Good. Durch time, by means of sins, wird jeden abgeweitert. By means of sins, Jews are, how do you say, driven away. That's the word nida. The word nida means to be rejected. The Jews are, so to speak, rejected. If them zocht on this, it says, the prophet says, Chach es seinen voran, by them inyanim from tuma, even though that there are matters of impurity, is aber benogea them. Oh, my, what's it got? Something I skipped. Yeah, you're right. Okay, but if them zocht, we say, then Chach es seinen voran, even though that there are things that the Jews are impure, is aber benogea them. Is aber benogea them yichud im bala. Even though the things of impurity, nevertheless, she can still be with her husband. What does this mean? Was in them besteht doch. I'm sorry. Yes, okay, good. Was in them, which in this contains doch der ikar, the main will from the Jews truly, and namely the gamri believe. The Jewish people want to be with God. Despite their impurity, they want to be with God. Und zu lieb them, because of this, Zayin and Zayin Makayim, that's why they do Torah and the commandments. Because they, in order to unite themselves with their husband, with God. So despite the fact that they are impure and that they did sins, but they desperately want to be connected to God. And that's why we do the Torah and the commandments, to connect to her husband. So Veren bar vereinzigt mit dem Eibishter, to be unified with God. We're talking about in this world, to do Torah and commandments in this world. And after a person dies, there's no Torah commandment. Is as nit kein inyan, so therefore there can't be, when the Jews are doing Torah and commandments, then there is no, and also in the Torah and commandments themselves, there cannot be any impurity. Blow is an inyan from Isser. So if so, then we say that, therefore we can say that when Jewish people do sins, what happens? Are they impure or they are just forbidden? If we say that they're impure, it means that something intrinsically, essentially, which nullifies them from being with God. If we say that they're just forbidden, it means that essentially they are permissible to God, but it just happens to be that they did something which disqualifies them temporarily. So that's the whole question. Is this idea that nida, that menstruation makes the woman impure, is just a law? If it's a law, so it's not so severe. Or is it really essentially impurity? Is it essential impurity? If it's impurity, then it's very deep. Whatever he's going to say also, impurity has no logic to it. Laws have logic to them. The Mailav is there, the difference between Isser, what's the difference between if the Jews do sins, they've gone against the Torah, or are they impure? They're going against God. They say impure to God. Isser is a type of bad, forbidden. If a person does a sin, Isser, it's like a sin. A sin, it's a type of bad which can be understood logically. God has a will. You went against his will. That's a sin. This means, as der Mensch, a person can verstehen, a person can understand, feeling them raw, you can feel the bad, which is a forbidden thing. For instance, a person eats impure food, unclean food, right? He thought he was eating kosher food. And the rabbi, he came and said, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I gave you the rabbit. I wanted to give him that. I mixed up the plates instead of I gave him the ultra orthodox food, and I gave you the rabbit. And you say, well, yeah, I wondered why it tasted so good. And this other guy said, yeah, this is the worst tasting rabbit I ever had in my life. He said, no, it's a kosher steak. Why? Because he made a mistake. So the Jew all of a sudden says, wow, it really tasted good, but I did a sin. That was awful. Now it tastes terrible. I hate it. And so what happened? He went, it said in the Torah, you shouldn't do it, and he went against it. So it's a little bit logical. God is creating me. This is what he wants. He deserves it. And I went against what God said. That's what it means. It's Isser. It's just, he did a sin, forbidden. Not that he made himself impure. Thus, which was seine Metame, the cup in the hearts. Oh, I think I skipped the line. I'm sorry. 1 second. Let me just. Oh. And now we can understand, you can feel the bad from if you do a sin, which a sin, it says, it clogs up the mind and the heart. The mind and the heart. When a filu vend the Torah, and even when the Torah says that it's permissible for a person to eat a forbidden thing, how could it be forbidden to eat a thing? Let's say, for instance, like the law is as ubra shabarecha was meg essen shericha. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, ubra shericha, a pregnant woman that smells not kosher food, and she feels that because of this she might have a miscarriage. Was meg, she's allowed to eat forbidden food. As shaftem oich, the mezig ra I mentioned was estes, even though it's permissible for him. Right? It's permissible for this woman. The law is, it says in the Shulchan Aruch that if a woman, a pregnant Jewish religious woman, she happens to pass by whatever it is, a not kosher restaurant, and by accident she smells the smell of cooked spare ribs or whatever there's over there, and all of a sudden she feels her child, she's about to miscarry because of it. It says in the book that what happens is that actually the child in the womb is actually alive, and the child is also conscious to a certain degree, and the child smells the smell and wants to come out. That's what it says. And therefore, it's permissible for her to eat, and in order to quiet the child down, she should eat a little tiny bit so that it's not a bigger enough amount to get punished by. It says, but the fact is, she could eat as much as she wants, and she doesn't get punished. So if it was permissible to eat, that's right. But nevertheless, the food still has an effect on her. That's if she did an Isser, Masha Enkian, which is not the case. If it's Tuma, if it's impurity, is a Zoy Sort Ra. This is a type of bad. Was is im nit shaykh so antafen ant open mit dem menschliche antappen mit dem menschliche Seichel und Gefühl. This is a thing which a person cannot possibly grasp in his intellect or his feeling. Sie is mer nit was, it's only chuka chakakte gazera gazarti. Impurity, right? Why is it a person touches a dead body? Why does that make him impure? He can't go into the holy temple. Why? No logic behind it. He didn't do anything bad. He just happened to be in a room where somebody died. He didn't know. All of a sudden, someone dies in the room. If you're in that same room, the law is that you're impure. In the time of the holy temple, you couldn't go to the temple. for the rest of your life until you were sprinkled. They had to take the ashes of a red cow and do this whole process. But you didn't do anything bad. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And why such a severe thing? Why such a, if you steal money, you can go into the holy temple. It's a bad thing. You shouldn't steal money. But the punishment is not anywhere near as severe as if you happen to touch a dead body by accident. You can never go for the rest of your life. You can't go into the holy temple until you get sprinkled with the red cow. Why is that? It's because it doesn't make any sense. The fact that if you touch a dead body, it makes you impure, that also doesn't make any sense. Just the whole thing doesn't make any sense. The punishment doesn't make any sense. The fact, the law, it makes no sense. And it's a deep type of impurity. It's just chukati. God said, I just made a law, and you do it. Was therefore is Isser b'chalalos, it's Isser, a thing which is a sin that's forbidden in general. This is only relevant. This is relevant also now. Now there's things that are forbidden. But tuma, impurity, in general, this is only in the time of the Holy Temple. So it's such a deep type of bad, which is, I'm sorry, the type of bad which is recognizable, you could think, so you can protect yourself all the time. But it's not the same thing as impurity. If it's bad, so you can always ask a person, 1 second, this food I'm going to eat, before I put it in my mouth, is it kosher? Is it not kosher? Right? Is this thing that I'm about to do? 1 second, is today Shabbat or is it not Shabbat? Is this permissible or is it not? You can ask. But impurity, you don't know. Just a dead person happens to touch you, and you don't even know about it. So you can't protect yourself from such a thing. And that type of impurity is much deeper, but it's only in the time of the Holy Temple. Vos is Tame nor mitzad gazera gazarti, because the impurity is only because God just decided. It's not logical. You can't protect yourself from it. Is there a steer? This contradicts nor to them hoicher medregas kedusha, to the highest levels of holiness, which is in the time of the temple. Nowadays, we're not so holy, so there's nothing wrong with impurity. Touching a dead body has no implications. In the time of the temple, it was. Aber the gabi them be shrinkter madriga, from the lower level, from holiness nowadays, is tuma, it has no effect whatsoever. Nowadays, there's things that are forbidden, and there's things that are. The only exception is by the Kohanim. It says, like I said before, a Kohen today is not allowed to be in a place where there's a dead body and touch a dead body. Says the Rebbe, also the Kohanim, so leave Zer Kedusha, because why do they can't be in a house what's holy? Because they have a high level of holiness. It's a little bit something like in the time of the temple. So therefore, they also now are warned not to connect themselves, not to touch anything that's impure. Because the bad from a forbidden thing, it can. Oh, good. I think we'll stop here. We're going to say, and we'll continue tomorrow. The point the Rebbe is trying to say is the connection between the Jews and God. The connection now between the Jews and God. We're saying that Jewish people are like a woman. They're the wife, the bride, and God is like the husband. And if the Jewish people now can be impure, or is it impure, or is it just a law? In other words, when the Jewish people sin, does that make them impure? Something really essentially, deeply the opposite of God when they sin, or is it just they did a law? They just covered over the good. They did a transgression, and it didn't reach to the essence and made them impure. Just went against the Torah, and it's possible that a person can repent from that. Which one is? We're going to talk about, God willing, more tomorrow. And now I'm going to tell you a story. No, I don't want to do that one. So I'm going to just, there we go.